Okay, hi, my name is David Kelsey, and today we're going to be working on some practice exercises for Lecture 13 of my critical thinking class. And these are practice exercises that relate to um, the discussion we had in Lecture 13 about inductive arguments. And the practice exercises that we'll focus on will really just ask of two different questions, really, that are embedded in each exercise. So the first question is, you are to determine whether the argument is an analogy or a generalization. That's first. And then secondly, whichever it is, what's the sample, the target, and the property in question? Okay. Now I think when we approach this type of question, what we want to do first, right, is we want to determine what the sample is and what the target is, because we know that the relationship between the sample and the target really determines whether we have a generalization or an analogy. So if we approach it like that, I think we can get these questions answered pretty quickly. Okay. So that being said, the first example, it says Earth is like Mars because both can sustain water, and since Earth can support life, so too can Mars, right? So if you think about the question here, right, we're making a comparison here really between Earth and Mars, right? Earth is like Mars because both can sustain water. Since Earth can support life, so can Mars, right? So, I think the sample here is Earth and the target is Mars. That being said, if you remember about arguments by analogy, they will always have a kind of single item as a target, right? And here we have a single item, which is Mars, as the target of our argument. And so this is an argument by analogy. So that's the sort of first part of the question. The next thing is to ask what the sample, target, and property in question are. We know that the sample is Earth and the target is Mars. So what then is the property in question? So it says then, sort of reading the passage again, it says, Earth is like Mars because both can sustain water. Since Earth can support life, so too can Mars. You see there at the end is, we're making this inference, right? Mars can support life because the Earth does, right? So supporting life, right, whether it can support life, that would be the property or feature in question, right? We're essentially arguing that because Earth can support life, so can Mars. And so supporting life is the property in question there. So we have with that first example an analogy that has as the sample Earth, the target Mars, and the property in question supporting life. Okay. Our next example says, Warren shows up to work on time. I bet he pays his rent on time. Okay. So this example is about Warren here. And you can see that, again, our sample looks to be here about him and how he shows up to work. And then our target is about how he pays rent. So I think the sample is something like Warren showing up to work, and our target is something like Warren's paying his rent. And you can see then that's our sample and target. And you can see then again that because we're talking about two separate classes here, two separate items, right? One is Warren's showing up to work, and the other one is his paying his rent, that we're dealing with also an argument by analogy, right? And the analogy again has the sample as his showing up to work, the target as his paying rent, and then you can notice, I think you should see that the comparison here, the analogy is being made between the two and how and whether or not those will be on time, right? So he shows up to work on time, so he's going to pay his rent on time. So being on time is your property or feature in question, right? Okay, so the next example, it says, I've seen at least 10 Disney movies and not one of them has been violent. Apparently Disney doesn't make violent movies. Okay, so here you see that the sample seems to be the 10 Disney movies that this person has seen. And then it looks like kind of what's going on is that this individual is making an inference about all of the Disney movies. Right? It says apparently Disney doesn't make violent movies. So the inference is made from the 10 this person's seen to all Disney movies, right? And so your sample is the 10, and then your target is every Disney movie, right? Now that being said, we know that for a generalization, right, the target class is always going to be lots of things. And so we have here a generalization, inductive generalization. Your sample, again, is the 10 Disney movies that you've seen. Target is all Disney movies, and then something like being a violent movie, or making violent movies maybe is better, is maybe our property, our feature in question, right? So we have the sample as the 10 that have been seen. The target is all the Disney movies, and the property in question is something like, I guess, making violent movies or something, or being violent movies, something like that. Okay, the next example, it says, as soon as I saw all these formulas and stuff, I knew I'd like symbolic logic. It's just like math, which I love. Okay, this one seems to be making a comparison between symbolic logic and math. And so we have an analogy, right? Our target here seems to be symbolic logic, and our sample is math, right? So our sample is math, our target is symbolic logic. So we have just one item as a target, and so we have an analogy. The property in question here is like loving it or something. So the argument goes that because you love math, you're going to love symbolic logic. So your sample is math, your target symbolic logic, and your property in question is like loving it or loving something. Okay. Okay, so the next example we'll look at says too much sun will make your face leathery. I suppose it will have that effect on your hands also, right? So you see here that we have a comparison being made to how the sun affects your face, and how that seems like it might be similar to how it will affect your hands, right? And so your sample here is your face, your target is your hands, right? And then the comparison there, because the target is just one item, right, your hands, and it's separate from your sample class, which is the face, right? You have, again, an analogy here, right? It's an analogy between how the sun will affect your face and your hands. And then notice that the property in question here seems to be something like being leathery, right? Your face is leathery, so your hands will be as well, something like that. Okay, the next example, it says the fries at McDonald's are too salty, judging from these. Okay, so I think this is a little bit of a tricky one, but you can see here that the reasoning is going from the particular fries that you're eating to all the fries at McDonald's, right? So your sample there is these fries, like whatever ones you're eating there, and then the target is all the fries at McDonald's. So what that means then is we're dealing with a generalization, right? We're reasoning from some of the fries, right, essentially the ones that you're eating, to all of them at McDonald's. So that's a generalization. So your sample then in the generalization, your sample is the fries that you're eating. The target is all the fries at McDonald's, and then the property in question here is that they're too salty, right? Okay, the next example, it says Yamaha makes great motorcycles. I'll bet their pianos are pretty good too. Okay. So the comparison here is between Yamaha motorcycles and pianos, right? So those are our sample and our target. You can see that the reasoning goes from how the motorcycles are to how the pianos will be. So the motorcycles are the sample and the pianos are the target. So then again, because we're dealing with separate classes here, this is an analogy, right? So in the analogy then, we have as the sample Yamaha motorcycles, the target is Yamaha pianos, and then the property seems to be just a comparison about how they're good. So it's being a good thing, something like that. Okay, the next example, it says the Hamptons, question, people there are snobs judging from what I've seen. Okay, so this again seems to be a generalization, because here we're inferring from what we've seen, right? The snobby people from the Hamptons that we've seen, we're inferring from that experience to make the claim that all people from the Hamptons are snobby, right? So our sample here seems to be the people from the Hamptons that I've seen. The target seems to be all people from the Hamptons, right? So this is a generalization, right? Your sample is just the ones you've seen. Your target is all the people at the Hamptons. So the sample is just a small part of that target class. Now, lastly, so we have a generalization. Your sample is the people you've seen from the Hamptons. The target is everyone from the Hamptons. And lastly, the property then seems to be something like being snobby, right? Okay, the next example, PCs are way faster than Macs. Just compare these two puppies, right? So here, our sample seems to be the two puppies, right? The two computers you're looking at. And then the target, it seems, is all PCs and Macs, right? The reasoning is from the two in front of you to all PCs and Macs. And so we have a generalization here, right? The sample being the two in front of you, the target being all PCs and Macs. And then the property in question seems to be something like PCs being faster than Macs, something like this. Okay, the next example, it says, did you see that? The drivers in this town are crazy, right? So this is a bit of one you have to reach in, and it's got an implied sort of sample and stuff. So the reasoning here goes from, did you see that, right, to the drivers in this town are crazy. So here the sample seems to be whatever was seen, right? Maybe a couple drivers acting crazy in this particular moment, right? So whatever was seen is the sample, and then the drivers in this town, right? That would be the target class, right? So again, here we're going from the ones we've seen to all of the drivers in this town, so we have a generalization, right? And the sample again is the ones you've seen. The target is all the people in the town, and then the property in question is like being crazy or something, or being a crazy driver, right? Okay, our next example says life insurance salespeople are always trying to sell you coverage you don't need. Anyways, the ones I know do. In this example, we seem to be reasoning from what we've experienced with the life insurance salespeople that we've had experience with, right, to all of them, right? So our sample here seems to be the life insurance people I know. And then the target seems to be all life insurance salespeople. So here we have a generalization. The property in question in this case, right, is something like trying to sell you coverage you don't need, right? You're reasoning that because the sample has done that, right, the ones you know, that all of them do that, right, all life insurance salespeople. So, okay, next example says almonds upset my stomach. I'd bet cashews do too, right? So here you can see that the reasoning goes from almonds to cashews. So your sample here is almonds and your target is cashews. So that makes this an argument by analogy. Lastly, this one is fairly easy to see the property in question, which is something like upsetting my stomach, right? You're reasoning that because almonds do that, the sample does that, so too will the target, right, which is cashews, right? So your property in question there is upsetting my stomach. Okay, the next example we have, it says my PC slowed way down after a couple of years. It'll happen to yours too, right? Here the sample seems to be my PC, and then the target seems to be yours, right? It's going to happen to yours too, right? So the sample is my PC and the target is yours. So that means we have an analogy here, right? The sample is my PC, the target is yours. And then the property in question seems to be something like slowing way down after a couple of years. Okay. So for our last example then, we have this example here. It says January's heating bill will be high given that December's was outrageous and January is supposed to be even colder. Right? So here we're making a comparison between how things went in December to how things will go in January, right? So our sample here is December, and our target is January. And you can see that because the sample and target are these separate months essentially, that we have an analogy. We have an analogy between December and January, right? And then lastly, you'll notice that the comparison here is about the heating bill, right? The heating bill was high in December, and so it's going to be high in January as well. And so the property in question there is whether the heating bill will be high, right? So December is the sample, target is January, and the property in question is the heating bill being a high one, right? So, okay. Well, thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed the lecture today and the practice exercises, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.